All right, so last time we introduced a little different ways, I should say, of calculating profits. And none of them were wrong, although some of them are more right than others, I think, depending on your perspective. So we had the English professor that was opening up his new restaurant called Essays, and we looked at how profits could be calculated in a variety of different ways. And it came out that if the professor paid himself a wage of $35,000, which is what he would have had to pay a manager had he had one, and then he got the $5,000 from the restaurant, he ended up making $40,000. And so this was the way the English professor calculated profits. I put my efforts into it, I make $40,000. The accountant calculated profits such that the business was actually making $5,000. And the reason was the distinction here between the 35 for the manager. So then we kind of had it more broke down. Hey, well, the business is kind of like making $5,000, and then you're of course paying yourself the 35. And so that was another way to calculate profits. And then finally, the econ student, his daughter, who was in Principles of Microeconomics class, said, "Dad, I think you should include your opportunity cost. You could be teaching if you weren't doing that. That's your true cost of your time, right? That's kind of the true cost of your time. And by calculating profits that way, he was making $60,000 at the university. So that's truly what he's giving up to put his time into the restaurant. It's not the 35, but rather the 60, which led to a profit of negative $20,000 or a $20,000 loss. All right, so again, none of these ways of calculating profits are really wrong. They're just different ways of looking at it. And so in econ class, where I want you to get the right answer on your homework and your tests and other things, in econ class, we are going to assume that we're looking at economic profits, where we've always included opportunity cost into the calculation. Now, the reason we do this is so that profits act like a signal. So I kind of want to say profits as a signal. Economists kind of treat profits like a big beacon of light. It's flashing information out to the marketplace in general. And when the economics professor is getting a negative 20, the market is flashing back. The signal that the English professor is getting is, you suck, you suck, you suck. Go do something else. You have a higher valued opportunity that you're overlooking. Go, leave, exit, right? That's the signal that the profits are doing now for us, because we included his opportunity cost in the measure. Whereas when profits are positive, we kind of get that warm, fuzzy feeling like I'm doing a good thing. Oh, I'm making some money at it, right? We might say to ourselves, I made 40 grand at it, when he's having small talk with his ex-colleagues at the university. Hey, how's that restaurant Essays going? It looks like you got a lot of cars out there. And he's like, yeah, I'm doing pretty good, you know? As long as he's got something positive here, it might be giving him a false signal if he's not really thinking hard about the numbers. So, when we look at economic profits that include opportunity cost, if economic profit is less than 0, in other words, it's a negative number here. We're going to use 0 as our marker. If economic profits are less than 0, then that signals you suck. That's a little harsh, isn't it? Or we can also be a little more friendly here and tell the professor to exit. Get out. Go do something else. You've got another alternative that's better. If economic profits are equal to 0, what is that signaling? You're doing okay. Good. And I kind of like that language. It's not, we'd like to do better, but it's absolutely, totally fine to make no money, as long as that money is defined as economic profits. You can't do better elsewhere, so you're just fine. You're okay. So it signals you are okay. And then finally, if economic profits are greater than 0, we didn't really talk about this one last time. What does that signal? You're doing awesome. You're doing great. Right.
So it goes red, black, and green.
Yeah, kind of red, black, and green. Yep, this would still be signaling go, go, go. But now I want you to think about, what is that broadcasting to the general market if we're getting this signal? Reports come out that the essays is just going gangbusters. It's incredible that they're making this much money. It's just so much money. It's way better. I'm a fool to, I should have left the professor business a long time ago and started this. Right? So what's it signaling to other people out there?
Other producers, other companies.
Other producers, other people, yeah, just general signals. What is it signaling? Get into that market, right? It's a good business to get into, right? So the profits now being abnormally high, right, above opportunity cost, is telling people to enter, enter, enter me. I'm good. Easy money. Come be rich, right? Profits are signaling enter. It's kind of like a fly going to the light, because we have a bunch of people out there that are interested in business and they're wanting to make money. Maybe they don't care so much whether they're running a restaurant or running a salon or owning this or that. They kind of they're attracted to investing their money where it'll be the most profitable, right? And all of a sudden, we learn about an English professor who knew nothing about business, opened up a restaurant, and it's going gangbusters. And they're starting to think to themselves, hey, if the English professor can do it, I can do it. And so they enter the market. All right, so economic profits greater than 0 signals to others, enter. Of course, the English professor is not going to leave. And by the way, it might also signal to the English professor to expand their business, perhaps, or it gives positive signals to the professor who's in there as well. But the one I really want to key in on is the other people entering the market. Because what happens when other firms enter the market in terms of the professor? Yeah, when we have this competition, what's going to happen to essays business? It might start to shrink a little bit because we're starting to share the pie of the market. And so we've got 2 pizza joints in town, depending on how we count Casey's and stuff, but kind of sit-down pizza. I don't know if I include Pizza Hut in that, so maybe we got 3. I don't really care for Pizza Hut pizza, sorry, but that's just me. So, but we have 3 pizza places. If another pizza place comes in town, if another pizza place, we can only have so much pizza, right? And there's kind of substitutes. Maybe sometimes you want Pizza Time, sometimes you want Pizza Village. You flip-flop around. And so that can start to take away some of those profits, because it's going to take away business from essays, right? As business starts to fall off, what happens to those economic profits? They go down. They get smaller. And when is the enter signal going to stop? When profits are back to what we call normal, or just okay. They're the same as what I could do doing other businesses, right? So when we're covering our opportunity cost, we're back to this okay signal, But it doesn't mean that a restaurant in Ottawa is any better place to put your money than in either another city or another industry completely, right? And so that's the adjustment process that we'll continue to work on the rest of the semester. Okay. Let's see, just to make sure we're on the right page, let's do another little example here. The restaurant needs a new grill. Maybe it's been up and running for a while. Maybe it's due to their expansion of the place or something, but the restaurant needs a new grill, and its price is $10,000.
Bless you.
Its price is $10,000. Now, as is pretty common in a lot of industries on the consumer side, we are given options. And so the professor here is given some options to pay cash, or they can have kind of a financing deal where he pays 10% interest. Okay, so we got two choices. We can pay cash, or we get a 10% loan with no payments for 1 year and all due at the end of the year. So that's the pitch that our restaurant supply guy gave us. Is that, hey, we can kind of carry you if you want. Let's just assume that the professor has $30,000 in cash reserves in the restaurant. Okay, $30,000 in cash reserves. In other words, he has a choice here. He could pay the $10,000 cash. He doesn't have to go the loan route, is what I want to pose to you. So he's got $30,000 cash. What's his choice? Should he pay cash or should he do the loan? Cash. I hear lots of cashes. Why? Okay, we got this interest factor. All right, so let's play that out. So if we get the loan, so the cost of the grill with the loan, with choice A here, cost of grill with loan is equal to, we've got the $10,000 grill, and then how much interest do we got? 10%, which is, according to this deal, going to be how much dollars? $1,000. So we've got an interest factor here of the 10,000 times the 10%, which is our $1,000. No, we didn't have monthly because the way I designed it was no payments for 1 year. It was all due at the end of the term. So I just wanted to keep it nice and easy, and so the cost of the grill is $11,000 with the interest, if we look at the total cost of the grill. And so if I'm hearing you right, is it better to pay $10,000 or better to pay $11,000? You're saying pay 10. That's wrong.
Is it because he's going to make money throughout the year?
So why would that be wrong? I just wanted to tell you that it's wrong to kind of get you thinking a different direction. I want you to start thinking about opportunity cost. Good. So say that a little louder, Tay. Okay. So we're looking at kind of a time value of money issue here. It's not fair to compare $11,000 a year from now versus $10,000 today. In order to make a fair comparison, we need to compare money in the same time period. What Tag is saying is that you got to look at the interest that you could have earned on the 10 that you have now. So just to be a little obnoxious about it, let's say that you could get 20% interest on your $10,000. How much would you have 1 year from now? 12,000, right? You get $2,000 worth of interest, pay off your $11,000 note, and you're actually 1,000 to the good, right? So that changes the answer depending on what your opportunity cost is. What are you giving up to do that action? Now, if your next best interest rate, as Tag was saying, is 5%, then I hold on to my 10,000, I get my 5%, 1 year from now I have 10,500, and I owe these guys 11,000, so I'm 500 upside down. That wasn't such a good idea, right? So depending on what the opportunity cost is of my money, I get a different answer as to whether I should pay cash or not pay cash. And in the example of a restaurant especially, depending on what's going on, this is completely situational. Maybe that 30,000 is needed to pursue other opportunities through the year. Maybe it's important if he's on kind of a growth mode he's expecting to get that 20% return on his money, or 30%, or maybe even 50 or 100% for that matter. Now, he might be starting to get a little aggressive, and we can have talks all day long on analyzing the risk and if that's a good idea, or whether you should grow slow or grow fast. That's a different topic. But what I want you to realize here is that the answer depends on the opportunity cost you have at hand. All right, so to sum this up then, we got the cost of grills 11,000. What is the cost of paying cash? I'm just going to kind of ask the question and then we'll answer it just like what we just did. What is the cost of paying cash? It's not 10,000. It's 10,000. So the cash cost is equal to the 10,000 plus the lost opportunities of investing it elsewhere. Only in one other place, by the way, because opportunity cost is the highest valued alternative that you gave up. The highest valued alternative. It's the thing you would have done if you didn't do what you did. That's my Dr. Seuss version of opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is the thing you would have done if you didn't do what you did. The thing you would have done if you didn't do what you did. Now, so you have to be careful on what that opportunity cost is. And so from this example, if opportunity cost is 20%, then the cost of paying cash, then the cost was, we gave up the cash, we kind of lost the $2,000 of interest, right? The cost was $2,000 for that we lost, giving us a total cost of 12. So if the opportunity cost is 20%, then the cost was $2,000 for lost interest and a total cost of 12,000. Let's put in this little note here. Must compare costs in the same time period. So what we're really looking at is the cost of the loan method in 1 year versus the cost of cash after 1 year. We gave up the 10,000 in period 1, but in doing so we gave up the 2 effectively giving us a cost of 12. Now I make the decision 12,000 is more costly than 11,000, so I should do the loan. So if we have this situation, therefore 12,000 is greater than 11,000, so do the loan. Now, that is a somewhat naive way of looking at it. I just have to interject here that that is generally not maybe the advice I would give to some small business owners. And here's what I've learned over the years with my years of business is that small business owners are overly optimistic on the rate of return they're going to get by not paying cash. Well, geez, I could get 20, 30%. Right? So I'm going to take that loan and grow my business. And if you tend to be overly optimistic on what you can do with your cash and you let it go, what happens, in my opinion, more times than not, is that you only earn the 5%, or worse yet, 0%, or worse yet, negative 10%, and you're stuck with this loan and you can't pay the loan back. So a lot safer way to progress is to actually take the thing with certainty, which is the fact that today I can pay cash and I know it's going to cost me 10, and move forward that way.
Say like online for our homework or the test or whatever, it just gives us that basic question that you gave us.
Right.
Our answer would have to be that we don't have enough information.
Yes, yeah, if it was just here, there would not be enough information. Or if it was kind of a short answer problem, I'd want you to say, well, if your opportunity cost, which is kind of the answer I'm getting you, if the opportunity cost is this, if it's that. So let me put up the second thing here. So this is one answer here with the if the opportunity cost is 20%. Two, if the opportunity cost is equal to 5%, then do cash. I'm just going to keep it kind of short and sweet. Then do cash.
Bless you.
Because we're looking at now 10,500 versus 11,000. And you're better off paying cash because it doesn't make sense to take out the loan. Okay, any other comments, clarifications, questions? All right, good. So our next step in this journey is to blow apart total cost in a different way. So what I gave you last time, I said that total costs can be broken down into two categories of explicit cost and implicit cost. So economists kind of specialize in the implicit cost category. Accountants are really good at the explicit cost because they're just easy numbers, giving you receipts, whatever, adding up the numbers, doing the tax return. And so by combining the two together, we really get the full opportunity cost. Now I'm going to take you on a slightly different twist to that and think about the different types of costs we have. So imagine you've got a grocery store business. We're all familiar with grocery stores, so that's why I've kind of picked this. Imagine you're a grocery store owner. Let's brainstorm what type of costs you face. So go. You can kind of rapid fire. I'm gonna maybe have 20 things here. You just start going and I'll... What's that? Transportation. Okay. Labor. So we've got labor of what type of labor were you thinking that came to mind? What type of laborer? Okay, there could be maintenance.
Utility.
We've got labor of what? Other forms. Let's hit the labor ones all in one shot. The stockers. Okay? Who else? The cashiers and the managers. All right, so we'll just stop at that. That at least gives us the idea here of thinking about labor of multiple people needed. Okay, what else we got going on at our inventory? So we've got our goods, inventory on their shelves, inventory of goods. Rent, good. Refrigerations, yeah, we got refrigerators, fridges, and coolers, freezers. Trying to reading a little bit into what you're saying, but we've been down to the grocery store. We know we got that. What else? Utilities. So kind of electricity, water, gas, etc. The normal things. Okay. Light bulbs. Okay. What else we got? Cleaning supplies. What do you mean by technology? Let's get that a little more specific to a grocery store. Cash registers, okay?
Yeah, we check in the inventory and it goes in the cash register.
All right, yeah, those little inventory gizmos, little iPad-looking devices. In the old days, they were kind of looked like more like a brick, but it's probably more of an iPad or iPod type looking device. So we've got cash registers. We've got our inventory gizmos. Not sure what those things are. Little calculator-looking things. Carts, shelves. Office supplies, good. We got paper and pencils in order to keep track in the office. Cart catcher things in the parking lot. Whatever they're called, cart catchers. What's that? Corrals, the cart corral, okay. Anything else? Taxes, good. That's something that the business is going to face. What's that? Fees, some sort of fees to the fees and licensing or whatever, licensing fees, some sort of business fees, okay? What's that? Okay, so the counters and belts. Okay, what else is going on? I think we're missing a few more, like taxes, fees. Somebody trips and falls, we might need liability, insurance, and that might have to use our attorney, right? So some legal fees, perhaps, before it even goes to insurance, or maybe it's not covered by insurance, if it's liability, whatever, those two might interact. All right, that's pretty good. So what I want to do, the reason why I wanted to push you on this is to look over this list, and economists make an important distinction on different types of costs. Those that vary with our product being produced, and those that do not. So what is the product? How does the grocery store make money? What's the product? How do they make money? The supply, they make money off selling the stuff, right? We've been there, we put our stuff on the belt, and the register person tells us we owe X amount of money, and they tuck it in, right? That's our business. Now, as we look at this list, what of these fees change with the amount of product that we're selling, and which do not change? Transportation is what? So let me go back to Sarah for a second here. Were you thinking transportation of like catering or something, or the product coming into the product coming in? Okay, so let's just kind of hammer that down here. So product in, that's coming in on trucks. So does that variable get higher or lower depending on the volume of business our grocery store is doing? It does, right? So assuming that this relationship here is we need more trucks of food, then there's going to be higher transportation costs by getting more trucks of food. So if we think about the volume of food that's running through our grocery store, that one would vary the way we've described it there. All right, maintenance. Not so much. We could maybe start to make an argument if we're doing double the business, then we might have more things breaking down or something maybe, right? So we might have a little bit more, but pretty much not.
Or technology got right. We wouldn't need that.
Okay, that could be. Stockers,
Yes.
we'd have them change it, right? We need more food stock. Stuff needs to go depending on how it's going. Cashiers.
Food technology, stuff like that.
Okay? So, and so what you want to think about is we now have a certain level of technology in our business. So given that, if volume increases, so we got to kind of fix what we got, right? So I'm not going to allow technology to change. So
What about, like,
with the current technology
what
we
about
have.
the income of the store? 'Cause, like, maybe they'll lay off some cashiers or something.
Again, I'm purely trying to nail down if I sell more goods, if that little buzzer's going beep, 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 and we start counting beeps, right? What is it for 1,000 beeps versus 5,000 beeps? That's what I'm talking about. Which ones of these change? Management. Does that change with the amount of beeps? I don't think I've ever used that in the time using it, characterize it as beeps, but no, we typically have managers that are probably on a salary, but not necessarily. But even if volume goes down that day and we're cutting cashiers because there's nobody in the store and it says, sorry, why don't you punch out? You know, you're done. We still got to keep the manager on, right? Even if there's just down to a few people walking around in our grocery store. Inventory of goods. Variable? Yes. Rent on the building? No. Totally independent of the number of beeps, right? 5 beeps or 5,000 beeps, your rent is your rent. Right? So it's fixed. Fridges, coolers, freezers. Variable or fixed? Fixed. Utilities, variable or fixed? Pretty fixed, right? Again, we might make an argument that the lights are on or something like that, but pretty fixed. I'd agree with you. Light bulbs. Fixed. In the very short term, the lights are on, whether there's 5,000 beeps that day or 500 beeps, those lights are on. We got to keep the store lit. It's pretty fixed, independent of that. Cleaning supplies? Slightly variable maybe, right? If we have to clean up more again or something, if there's more activity, we may have to do more cleaning. So it might be slightly variable, but probably mostly fixed, I would say. The cash register. Fixed. The actual machine of the cash register, that cost would be fixed. Even if we're leasing the machine, we don't own it. We pay $10 a month for one cash register. That $10 is $10 no matter if there's 5,000 beeps or 500 beeps, right? So that is fixed. These inventory gizmos, same type of thing going on. The amount of carts we have, fixed. Shelves, fixed. Office supplies, fixed. Cart catchers, fixed. Taxes can be variable, right? If we're paying an income tax, if we have a higher volume, then that type of tax might go up. Property taxes would be fixed, kind of like rent. So this is kind of a question mark. Sales taxes, of course, the more I sell, the more I pay in. So that tax is probably mostly variable if we're talking about sales and income tax. Then that kind of cost would vary depending on the business. My licensing fees, that's probably fixed, right? You paid X amount of money to open up your business. It doesn't matter if you do a lot of business or a little bit of business. Counters and belts, fixed. Insurance, fixed, right? The insurance company is covering other things, liability, attorney legal fees, fixed. Maybe we could make an argument of more trips and falls as volume goes up. So all businesses can go through and do this. And actually, it's very important, as we're going to learn, that businesses think hard about the costs that vary with their product and those that do not. Because most of the bad decisions that get made in a business is getting tripped up on this. Oh, well, I've got this cost here of we're paying $2,000 a month. Man, we gotta make this change and do something or whatever. What we're going to learn is that it's important when we're thinking about changing our product or making a decision within our business, we need to keep into account all types of costs. But for decision making, the variable costs, the things I can change, the things I do have power on, are much more important. like the cashiers, do I cut them or do I keep them for the next 4 hours? I think business is slow. I can cut my costs by letting them go, or do I keep them on a little bit longer? All right? Variable costs versus fixed costs. All right, so that is our kickoff, by the way. This is chapter 11 material, looking at the cost of production. So, putting this back into perspective, profits are equal to total revenue minus total cost. All right. Now what we're doing is we're going to say this total cost right here can be broke down into two parts also. Total variable cost and total fixed cost. So just to kind of make sure we got this all complete here, the total cost of my business is equal to total variable cost and total fixed cost. What makes a variable cost variable? The fact that it varies with the quantity produced. Varies with quantity. Total fixed costs do not vary with quantity. One way to highlight this for you, hopefully to drive it home, is that if I close my grocery store on Sundays, do I eliminate all my costs? Which costs do I eliminate? All your variable costs, which means you still have to pay your fixed costs. So do you guys know a few businesses that close one day out of the week? Chick-fil-A, they've made that decision, right? So they made the decision to close down. Whatever the reasons were, this is what's going on. They still have to pay the rent that day, even though, again, they pay monthly rent. But if we start thinking about there's 31 days in a month, I'm paying $2,000, $2,000 divided by 31, that would give me my daily rent is one way to think about it. So it's costing me money to shut down my business, perhaps. Yeah, so that's right. We're going to look more closely at what the implications of that are. If I shut down my business, what am I giving up? What's the opportunity cost of giving it up? All right, so note, and this is something that you'll see on some of your homework and test questions. This is kind of important. If quantity equals 0, it doesn't necessarily mean you're out of business, that you've left the industry, but you've just chosen not to produce that day. If quantity equals 0, then total cost equals total fixed cost. Now we talked about implicit costs and explicit costs. Can a implicit cost be variable, or is it always fixed? It could be variable. So I just wanted to call that to your attention, that the idea of opportunity cost does not necessarily directly tie to one of these or the other. A lot of times it tends to fall on the fixed side, but it can be variable as well. So don't put those two things together. All your costs in econ class, these are your full opportunity costs. Because we've put those implicit costs, both in our variable and our fixed, we've kind of taken into account all of our other opportunities. We have that base covered. So this is your full opportunity cost. Okay. let's see. Sometimes it is useful to look at average costs. So, I guess maybe playing on my beep scenario, I don't know if that's a very good one or not, but if I did 5,000 beeps, how would I calculate the average cost of a beep? Which, by the way, some stores do that, right? Especially a grocery store. If we're trying to just have one variable, it may give us useful information, it may not, but if we want to know how many actual items are going across the belt, that's a statistic that we can at least think about on the volume of business.
Would be the average cost of like each beep or like?
Yeah, of each beep. That's right. So how would you calculate if the total cost was $120,000? You added up the total cost of $120,000, and you know that there was 5,000 beeps. How would you calculate the average total cost of a beep? 120,000 divided by the 5,000, the quantity of beeps, right? So that's how we do the average cost. Now I'm going to characterize that a little differently and rewrite, first of all, the equation we just did. So go ahead and write the variable cost being separated into the total cost being separated into variable and fixed. What you just told me is to calculate the average cost, divide by the number of beeps. And if we were just a Mountain Dew, and we sold 5,000 Mountain Dews, we'd be doing the same thing, right? So I don't want to confuse the thing with the beeps, but it's just the quantity that you produce. What I do to one side of the equation, I got to do the other. So the reason I did it this way is that it reminds us of the relationship of the averages. And it gives us another formula that we're going to use a lot in some of the homework and getting through things. The average total cost of producing the product, 120,000 divided by the 5,000 beeps. What does that equal? 120,000 divided by the 5,000 beeps. 24. So we've got $24 per beep was our average cost per beep. That can be broke down into its averages also. So the average total cost of 24 now is going to be broke down into the average variable cost per unit plus the average fixed cost per unit. And this is a formula that I recommend you memorize. So if you want to put a little note in your notes to say memorize this whole thing. And the reason I do it is I think it tells a nice story and it makes your life a little bit easier. There's like 6 equations wrapped up into one. 6 different formulas. One formula is this: average total cost equals total cost divided by quantity. Another one is this: average variable cost is total variable cost divided by quantity. And then of course we got the other one here. We've got the relationship of the totals. We got the relationships of the averages. We've got a whole bunch of information kind of jam-packed into one neat little spot. All right, questions or comments there? All right. So time to put on our graphing goggles. What does this thing look like? Before we go there, I want to think about the physical process going on. So let's look at the physical process behind the cost. because here we're just dealing with dollars. And I want to think about the physical process. You can kind of think back to one of our early pictures here, that the business comes up with a method to combine the scarce resources, land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, in the creation of a pizza, a t-shirt, a basketball, right? That's a physical engineering thing is what I'm getting at, is that we might be able to do that with a lot of laborers and a little bit of machines, or a lot of machines and a little bit of laborers. There might be 100 different ways to make a basketball. That process is what I want to think about next, that physical process. All right, so if I was to graph labor here and total product here, so let's think about hamburgers or something, or basketballs or pizzas, right? So we got the quantity of that going on. As I add more and more people to the production process, what happens to my quantity of product? Does it go up, down? It goes up, right? Do you expect that relationship to look like A, B, or C? C? Why?
It comes to a point where no matter how many people you have, you can still only produce so many of a product.
Right. If you go out to the point of being really obnoxious, you can't imagine having 100 people out here and getting a bunch more product. Unless at the same time I'm adding more buildings, more machines, more, if I'm really scaling up, but even then it's kind of a stretch to think that it wouldn't look like C. And so that's right, that this part here is capturing an important principle that's going to sound very similar to another one we had, the law of diminishing marginal product. The law of diminishing marginal product. What was that other law we did? Just it might have even been last time. Diminishing utility. The law, we had utility, my happiness up here, and here we had quantity of Oreos or something. And as I consumed more and more gulps or more and more bites, the amount of satisfaction I got from each additional bite fell. It's not quite as obvious, I don't think, with the production process. Not quite as obvious. So let me try to take a different approach. So I used to work in a restaurant. My first job was doing dishes. And after about a month, I started cooking. So this one is kind of near and dear to my heart. Here's my grill top. Right? So this is my grill. And I'm in the hamburger making business. And I work the grill by myself. And if I work it by myself, I can crank out 100 hamburgers. Okay, 100 hamburgers working by myself. If I add a second person to this process, how many hamburgers do you think we can do together? 200? More than 200 or less than 200? Less than 200?
What's the capacity?
The grill, there's a little excess capacity. So yeah, the grill was plenty big at this time. So good question. Less than 200. So that's kind of leading to the C, right? Which I said was important. Can you tell me any sort of story where we'd get greater than 200? Okay, if we had way excess capacity, I mean, it could be a super big grill. We'd actually need more than just a monster grill. I'll tell you that much. What's that? We would have more patties to do, so that's not a problem. We have a refrigerator full of hamburger meat.
If you included not just grilling the burger, but the preparation, so
okay,
you got another person.
And what might those two people be able to do together that would cause them to together make more than 200 if acting individually, either one, by the way, could do 100. We're going to assume that they're identical in skills and everything. What would make it more efficient, though? Specialization. Okay, so like what? Give me an example.
just the patty.
Somebody just does the patties, right? Somebody does the patties, somebody preps the buns, and all of a sudden, together, we can be more efficient and crank out more hamburgers than just acting alone, which is curve number A here. Curve number A, curve letter. This curve, A, shows what we call increasing marginal product, so that the two of us together can do over 200 potentially. Now, if I add a third person, grill size stays the same. Does our product together, let's say that the two of us together could have done 220, you know, can the three of us together do 500 now? Depends on how much, on the process, right? It depends on, can we specialize again? Does 3 people bring us now, you strictly to pattying them up, I will take the patties, put them on the grill and tend to them, you do the buns, right? So it's possible, theoretically, that we could once again have increasing returns. What about a fourth person?
In each other's face.
What about a fifth person? Sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, right? Hey, what are you doing this weekend? Did you know there's a party going on at the frat house? Oh yeah, okay, right? So they start, John, so we can start to see that eventually we're going to get to C. It's possible early on that we have some increasing returns, but the law of diminishing marginal product says eventually we're going to get something looking like C. And so the real total product curve can be theoretically a combination of both. And we might have an increasing portion for a while, but eventually it's going to peter out. And so the total product curve, TP, the total product of labor, looks something like this. And notice that it mimics A, B, and C. Up to this inflection point where it kind of flips from going up and now it's starting to diminish. At that inflection point, we have area A going on, right? And now over here, I mean, we kind of have B at a point in time. Maybe that stays consistent, by the way. There could be even a little flat spot and we could have B. But otherwise, we've got kind of this B at a point in time, and now we've got C going on.
With the whole thing as a, wouldn't like that section be C and then the whole thing as a whole be B technically? Because if you put B there.
No, because we don't want to, what you'd be doing is maybe taking the average of the two, is what I'm hearing you say. We could kind of take the average of the highs and the lows, but that's a meaningless statistic. So it could be done, but it's not capturing reality for us. Right? So this is really capturing reality at the margin. And so this gives us the law of diminishing marginal product, which is MPL, the marginal product of labor. So I didn't define marginal product first, so marginal product, in fact, let me back up even one more step. Let me give you the total product. The total product of labor, which is over here, by the way, TP, total product, or Q, the amount of quantity that's going on. The total product is the total quantity produced. By an amount of labor. I got 100 workers, I come to this little equation, I got 100, and boom, I have X amount of hamburgers. If I have 50 workers, I go up to this equation, and I've got, boom, that amount of hamburgers, right? So that's the total product of labor. The marginal product of labor is equal to, I'm going to give you the formula first, the change in total product, or the change in Q, I'm going to give it to you both ways, divided by the change in labor. So another way of thinking about this is, or you can just say, or the change in quantity over the change in labor. And it's the additional product made by an additional unit of labor. So this is the additional product from an additional unit of labor. I add an extra person, how much extra hamburgers do I get? The seventh person is different in the amount of burgers they add compared to the second person, right? The third, just like the diminishing utility thing gave us, the third person, the seventh person, by the way, they're equally skilled. They might even think of them as being robots, right? But the fact that we have a fixed grill space, we're going to have this law of diminishing marginal products kick in.
So like with the utility, like once you get to a certain point, it starts going negative. It'd be the same if you got like more laborers.
Start to go down.
Possibly, yeah. We generally would theoretically think that if we're managing well, that I can have this person sit in the corner and not do anything, and hopefully that won't cause my product to fall. But in reality, that's not true, because if I have the wrong person and those people are just gabbing all day long and they're not being very productive, then yeah, it could dip down, right? Okay, good. Which you kind of bring up an interesting distinction between management class and economics. With economics, we're going to focus more in on the kind of the formula, the equation, get the gist of all that. But then we get into some of those realities, maybe in other disciplines with human resources, on how productivity might fall. And by the way, economists tackle that issue too, but it's a little different from what we learn in principles here. All right, so the law. The law of diminishing marginal product. Definition. As you add more and more of a variable resource. As you add more and more of a variable resource, i.e. like cooks or cook labor from my example, that was our variable resource, generically speaking. As you add more and more of a variable resource to at least one fixed resource, like our capital grill from this example, as you add more and more of a variable resource to at least one fixed resource, the amount of product, which in our case was our quantity of hamburgers, the amount of product from each additional worker, just to avoid putting in variable resource in here, from each additional worker eventually diminishes. Eventually falls or diminishes. That's a super important observation that many high-level managers and even high-level accountants and high-level attorneys and a lot of people out there, average moms and pops and small business people, don't get. And so that's an important one to understand. Okay, questions or comments there? All right, so how does this tie into our graphs of costs? So next we're going to look at graphing costs. So I'm going to start you off with the total fixed cost graph. We're going to be measuring dollars here, getting a little bit away from what we did with supply and demand. You know how I always tended to put a price if this was the price, the quantity of pizza, this was the price of pizza. So we're just going to put dollars up there because now we're going to be thinking about cost, and it might be a price, but it might be a cost, or it might be something else. So we're just going to generically put dollars up here. What does the total fixed cost curve look like? $120,000. I see a few people doing this, right? So if I was to look at the $120,000, if I produce this many units, I have this much total fixed cost. If I double that, I have this much fixed cost, right? So my total fixed cost curve is perfectly horizontal because no matter what quantity I produce, it is fixed. All right, so let's see. If I if I produce, well, before I go there, what does the average cost curve look like? Average fixed cost curve look like? Average fixed cost curve. Horizontal line, just a little bit at the same price. So is it the same thing here? Equals average fixed cost? So if I produce 10,000 units, what is my average fixed cost? $12, right? So if I produce 1 unit, what is my average fixed cost? $120,000. My first unit's pretty darn expensive, isn't it? So my very first unit, way over here near the horizontal axis, if I just produce 1 unit and I've got $120,000 worth of rent, utilities, all the things we did with our grocery store, if I had that much but I only had 1 beep, oh crap, what was my average fixed cost? Well, that unit just cost you $120,000. Now the beauty of it is though, if I do 2 units, what is my average fixed cost per unit now? $60,000. I cut it in half. Woohoo! Now we're doing good. Because so here is 60,000 is here. At 2 units, I have dramatically dropped. All right. What was it at 10,000 units? 12. Right. So 120,000 divided by my 10,000 units. Knock those out. 120 divided by 10 is 12. So at 10,000 units, which I'm just going to jump to the chase over here, if I'm producing 10,000 units, then I'm not really to scale here, but that's $12. All right, so this average fixed cost curve looks something like this. And it approaches the horizontal axis, but it never gets there. So the moral of the story, when you have a business that has a lot of fixed costs, how can you offset those? Sell a lot of product, right? If you sell a lot of product, then those fixed costs don't even matter too much. It's all about volume. Now that's only looking at fixed costs of problem, right? So that's one part of the equation looking there. All right. For the next one, I want to draw another graph. And for this one, I'm going to draw the average total and the average variable. And I want you to watch how I draw it so that you guys can draw it in right, and then we'll talk about why it looks that way, because it's a little harder to do. the average total cost curve is kind of a bowl shaped. So go ahead and draw a bowl of some sort, something that looks roughly like that. And then draw a big fat dot where it's minimized. The actual minimum point, kind of put a big fat dot there. The average variable cost curve is also bowl-shaped, but it bottoms out before the average total cost curve does. So with this one, and then it does another thing. So before you draw it, it does this other thing. As you draw this one, have it bottom out somewhere. And then as you come up here, I want you to approach so that the vertical distance is getting smaller and smaller and smaller as you rise up towards the average total cost curve. And then again, put a big fat dot at the minimum of the average variable cost curve. We're going to get there, but yeah, once we get putting in a few more things. All right, everybody caught up to here? Why did I do this narrowing thing? Eventually the total, Jenna?
Because the average total cost is the average variable cost plus the average fixed cost, so it gets smaller.
Okay, so what does this distance represent?
The distance between
Over here, right? Yep, that's right. So we won't be drawing this one anymore. We usually draw this one because this graph has this information on it. Because at a given quantity, if we pick out this quantity of, let's call it 100 units, the average variable cost is given by the height of the average variable cost curve. How do I do that? I hang a left and I read off this number. The average total cost of producing 100 units at my business is given by the average total cost curve. I go up to the average total cost curve, I hang a left, and that number there represents my average total cost. Looking back at that formula, I want you to memorize, what do we know about the relationship between average total, average variable, and average fixed? Average variable and average fixed. If you do what to them? If you add them. So adding up those two, we look back at the formula, average variable plus average fixed equals average total. In other words, this little gap at 100 units, the fixed cost is right here by that green amount. Right? So we kind of got all that data is in there. The vertical distance between this curve and this curve is the average fixed cost. And if that 100 units, I don't have this drawn to the same scale, whatever this vertical distance is, we could have that shown here, and that vertical distance would be like here, if I did draw it in. So we could draw it in if we wanted, and then it would look like that, that distance, that, so we don't do it. It's already there. All right, so questions on that? All right. So the most important curve and formula I haven't given to you. The most important of all these in economics class is the marginal cost. Marginal cost is what? I'd like to hear it from you rather than me just giving it to you. We've got some, let me give you 1 sec, hold on, I'll give you a shot. Terminology similar to what we've been doing, right? Marginal benefit, marginal utility, marginal product, marginal whatever. Hold. The additional cost to produce one more unit, right? So you can start to have that mindset that anytime you see the word marginal, you can kind of use as a substitute additional, an extra unit, an additional unit, an additional 1 unit if we want to be more specific. We're really narrowing down, well, what would an extra 1 cost me for decision? So marginal cost, and I'm gonna word it a little differently than what you just did, is the change in total cost from an additional unit of production or sales or whatever we do. The change in total cost from an additional unit of production. From a formula standpoint, we would write that as the change in total cost divided by the change in quantity now, the extra unit produced. A lot of times we're going to just have that be 1. But the reason we write it this way is that sometimes when we have our schedule goggles on, those schedule goggles might take us down this path where we have total cost the other way. I've got quantity and total cost here, and it goes from 0 to 10 to 20. I have data that this runs $300, then it goes up to $500, and then it goes up to $1,000. Now wait a second. Oops, I screwed up, didn't I? If I have 0 quantity, that's got to be 0. It's your fixed cost. Good. You will see this in an example where you have to fill in the table or fill in the blank. Remember that when quantity is 0, all costs are fixed. So there still is some fixed cost, but there is no variable cost. And so the difference when we went to 10 units, we added $200 worth of cost, and the quantity went up by 10. So 200 divided by 10 gives us 20 bucks. Over that interval, the average cost per 1 unit was about 20 bucks. Okay? So that's why we have the formula looking this way. You'll get some work on it here. In fact, I'm going to do a little more detailed example in a bit. Now, this I want to extend a little step further since you guys had that equation. Without the triangles, I gave you something here, didn't I? Total cost, maybe even that, is equal to what? Look back at the little box that I want you to memorize. Variable cost and fixed costs added up. So one way to re-express this is to say it's the change in total variable cost over the change in quantity plus the change in total fixed cost over the change in quantity. I'm just extending that formula that we had. Remember, the little triangle is always change. That's kind of our shorthand notation that we use in math class too, that you might have seen like with rise over run. Now, somebody please simplify this expression for me. Somebody simplify this expression for me.
Change in TVC plus change in TFC divided by quantity.
Okay, you could put the quantity over the whole thing. I want something different than that. Let me go. I saw Jenna's hand.
Should it just be the change in the average rate?
Okay, and why?
Actually,
Not sure? You're kind of onto something, yeah.
So the change in total cost equals the change in total variable cost plus the change in total fixed.
No. Nope. Looking for something different than that. Anybody else? I'll give you another hint here in a sec. I'm waiting for my extra credit pen to come out and jump off the page, but I haven't heard it yet. Olden?
Is it, what is simplified, it would be TBC plus PFC over QQ?
No, nope, there's nothing like that going on. So let me, go ahead, Jeff.
That average variable cost plus the average fixed cost?
No. So let me cut to the chase here. I'll give you one hint, and then you can jump in if you want. How much does total fixed cost change by when I add another unit sold? 0. So what is this number? 0. 0 divided by some number is 0. This whole thing disappears. So to simplify this, gives us an important thing that I do want you to know. I kind of wanted to bring you through that logic so that you're remembering it. But on a homework or test problem, you need to know that the only costs that change are total variable costs. So that's another way to calculate marginal cost. If I only give you variable cost, you can still calculate it. Or if I give you total cost like I did over here, you can also calculate it. Because only variable costs change, and that's what we're focusing in on for the marginal cost. Okay, questions on that? All right, so let's graph this little guy out. I'm just going to give it to you again because it's a little bit easier to just give it to you and then think about it. I had you put these big fat dots up here for a special reason. The marginal cost curve is kind of J-shaped, and then it cuts through those minimum points. So add that to your graph now. Kind of a little J-shaped here, and then it comes through and cuts through the minimum points of those average total cost curves.
Curiosity, are all three slopes the same in the beginning? Just for
No, not necessarily. All right, so I'd also like you to add that that big fat dot represents the minimum of the average total cost curve. Minimum. And this big fat dot here represents the minimum of the average variable cost curve. That's why we put the big fat dot there. Oh, okay. Okay, so why does it have that shape? I know some of you, this is your freshman semester, but let's think of some of you that might have been here a little while longer. So you've completed 2 years, and this is now the first semester of your junior year. And while you've been here, you've been able to maintain a 3.0 grade point average. Okay, so your overall at OU is a 3.0. During the fall semester, you start to slack off a little bit, heading to a few parties, not getting your homework done. So you're not doing quite as good as you did your first 2 years. And during the fall semester, you get a 2.5 GPA for the semester average. What happens to your overall? Does it fall or go up or stay the same? It falls. Does it fall down to a 2.5?
No.
No, because we're just adding those marginal grades onto your overall average. But it is causing your average to come down. Maybe, I'm just making up numbers, maybe it comes down to a 2.9. So now your overall average is a 2.9. You know that you want to get a 3.0 to get a good job out there, right? And you're like, I got to buckle down, enough partying, I am going to do good. So you buckle down, and the next semester you improve yourself to a 2.9. What happens to your overall GPA? Does it go up or down or stay the same? It stays the same. Remember that I dropped it to a 2.9. Your overall fell to a 2.9. Now you actually raised relative to last semester. You had a 2.5, and now you had a 2.9. But your overall GPA stays the same at 2.9. So now you're like, gosh, I guess I really do got to buckle down, hit the books. Next semester, 4.0, straight bullets across the sheet, right? Does your overall GPA go up to a 4.0? No, of course not. You've got all the old baggage to contend with. So your semester grade's a 4.0, but your overall GPA is not going to rise to that. Let's have the story end with a happy ending that it rises to 3.1. Okay, so it's going to rise some amount. Now you're getting into that zone. Hopefully you keep a 4.0 the rest of the semester. That's what's going on here with hamburgers. That's what's going on right here with your hamburgers. Here it is. The cost of the 50th, using my numbers here, the cost of the 50th hamburger was less than the $5 cost of all 50. So when I calculate the average cost of 50 hamburgers, the average total cost was $5. But if I think about cranking out the 50th hamburger, I don't have to buy a new grill, right? I might even be able to have the same worker I had do that, but maybe I have to increase. I certainly have to have more hamburger because a hamburger has a direct variable cost of that patty. So I am absorbing some cost. How much cost? Well, I go up to the height of the marginal cost curve and learn that the 50th hamburger only ran me $3. What did that cause the average to do? Come down. So as I produce the 51st, the 52nd, the 53rd, all of those burgers are a little cheaper than the average because I'm able to better utilize my grill space, et cetera, all of that story going on. Until we get to this point where the cost of the 72nd hamburger is equal to my total cost, $4.90. I'm just making up some numbers here, right? So my average cost fell from $5 to $4.90 as I increased from 50 to 72. But now the 72nd hamburger cost me $4.90. As I increase production, I start to bump into the law of diminishing product, and I have to add that 5th worker and the 6th worker and the 7th worker, and that can start to drive up the cost of a burger. Maybe I even eventually have to get a bigger grill or a smaller, a bigger space, whatever. Now the cost of the 80th burger is higher than $4.90, causing my average to start to climb up. That's an important relationship between marginal and average. Okay, questions there? The same thing was going on with the variable cost. It cuts through the minimum point, so that's why we have those big fat dots. Now, what's going on here with the J? Just to kind of complete the picture. So as I added my early hamburgers, I found that I was lowering the cost. The cost kept going down and down, which of course makes sense since the cost is below the averages were falling, so that's okay. But any thoughts here on what kicked in? How the cost curve started climbing rather than falling? That increasing product thing started to kick in, right? Where I might have the first worker and the second worker working together was able to increase a bunch of hamburgers, but sooner or later, those costs started to go up. That's where I'm going to bring you next, is actually hammering out some numbers with that. Okay, we got equation goggles. We got graphing goggles. We even threw on a little bit of schedule goggles to kind of try to get these numbers down. So I'm going to continue on with some schedule goggles next. The thing that is kind of perplexing is that as the restaurant adds more workers, is the cost of each additional worker different? Is there an increasing cost to those in terms of the wage that I pay? So if McDonald's needs another person for the 4th worker versus the 8th worker, Tell me about their wage that McDonald's is likely paying for that entry-level person. Same wage, right? I mean, we can add more. We can probably hire as many people as we want at, let's say, $8 an hour here in Ottawa. We need 10 people, you'll get 10 people at $8. So my point is that the cost of each additional worker is kind of flat. If we were to look at that concept at $8, at a wage of $8, and I'm measuring labor here, I can hire one person, two persons, 10 people, whatever, at a wage of $8. So my cost of an additional person is flat. So how do we get that reconciled with this concept is what I want to chew on for a little bit next. All right, so give yourself a fresh page. We're going to have a, 1, 2, 3, 4, about 9 columns of data we're going to build on. This is exciting, exciting times. All right, here we go. So, we're going to, work left to right. You'll see once I start it off here. So first one is labor, the quantity of labor. We've got 0 cooks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got the quantity of hamburgers that each cook is producing. 0 cooks, 0 hamburgers. It's a variable cost. 1 cook gives me 100 hamburgers. 2 cooks gives me 220. 3 cooks gives me 320. 4 cooks give me 400. 5 cooks gives me 460 hamburgers. Next column, the marginal product of labor is equal to what? What's that formula look like again? Change in quantity over the change in labor. So that's in your notes. We just did it a little bit ago. Change in quantity of hamburgers over the change in workers. So the marginal product of the first worker is 100, right? The first guy gave me 100 hamburgers. Marginal product of the second worker, 110. Right? So I added 2. So 110 we divide by 2. Everybody agree with that? Good. I'm glad to see some head shaking. That's right. That's not the right answer.
It's the change.
The change, right. So it's the change in hamburgers from where we started. If I'm looking at the product that was added by the second worker, the second worker brought me 120. Now, you can always go back to the formula here, right? So we've got the change in quantity. Maybe I'll blow this one up here a little bit. 220 minus 100 divided by the change in labor, which was 2 minus 1. I'm kind of going into obnoxious detail here, right? But 2 minus 1 gives me my 120. Marginal product of the third worker, 33.33. No, 100, right. So the third worker adds, that's because we're doing marginal product. So Todd, what are you calculating? I think that this is a good thing to bring up. I was going to bring it up later, but since you brought it up, 33.3 is a statistic. It's not what I'm asking for, but it is a statistic. What is it?
Change in quantity divided by total labor.
Yeah, change in quantity divided by the change in labor, which, what would you call that? The average product of labor. I have 3 workers. On average, each one of them is taking, if I took 300, I should come back here, 320 divided by 3, right? That would be the average product of each person. You were taking the extra and then dividing it by the 3, which I guess was extra wrong. Sorry, I wasn't quite tracking with you. So, but it's a good thing to bring up because you need to know that distinction. That's the whole critical point here. So we got 100 units. 4th worker, 80. Good. Now we're on it. 60. The 5th worker adds 60 hamburgers. Okay, so let's do the average product next. Average product of labor. So the average product labor is the quantity of hamburgers, no triangle, divided by the total quantity of labor. Look at how close these formulas are. We're only missing the triangle, but the triangle is what it's all about. It's all about looking at the changes. So the average product of labor when I have one person is what? 100. So it is 100 there. Average product of 2, 110. Good. Next one ends up being 106.67. You need maybe a calculator to pull that one off if you're not a genius, which I'm not, so I would pull out the calculator. Here we've got 400 hamburgers with 4 workers, so on average each one's doing 100. And finally 460, we've got 5 workers. That ends up being 92. All right, so one reason this is so important again is people who don't have the economic way of thinking often hang on the averages. And look at the mistake you're making here. If you are currently having 4 workers and you're like, you know what, business is kind of upticking a little bit. We could really use some more hamburgers, so I need 100 more hamburgers, so I'm just going to hire 1 more person. When they hire that person, how many more hamburgers do they get? They get 60. They think they're going to get 100 because the average was 100, but they're actually going to be short 40 hamburgers because of the law of diminishing marginal product. That's why it's important to be thinking at the margin when it's decision-making time. But politicians, business owners, lots of people kind of buy into this average, and they think that the next thing they do with that change is going to get them what they were getting, but that's looking at the averages, not the marginal. All right, what else we got here? Let's say that the total cost of labor, if we have a wage, suppose we got maybe I'll put this down here just for now. Suppose that we've got a wage equal to $10 an hour. So we got a nice paycheck for our people. And we have a 10-hour shift. What is the cost of the first worker? $100, 10 times 10. So that first worker, if we're measuring now the total cost of labor, 1 worker is going to cost me $100, given those little details here. And we won't get into partial shifts and everything. So each unit of labor for a day is going to run 100. 0 workers, of course, I have zero cost of labor. 2 workers runs me 200, 3, 300, 4, 400, 5, 500. So it just goes up by 100 each time. If I also have total fixed cost equal to $100 for the rent of my equipment. Notice where I place that one is at the 0. If I have 0 product, I still have to pay the rent. So I got 100, but now as I produce 100 hamburgers, what happens to my fixed cost? Nothing. Stays the same. 100, 100, 100. It is independent of the quantity I produce. total cost. Again, we've kind of simplified things into just this is our only two costs. So all I want to do is add those together. 100 plus 0 is 100. 100 plus 100 is 200. 300. 400. 500. And 600. All right. What is the marginal cost looking like?
You put the total cost of labor, but that could also just be your total variable cost, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, we're just treating that as our only variable for simplicity. So as I grow my business and I increase volume, my change in total cost along the way is what? 100. So we can think about it this way, where each one it's going up by 100 each time. We kind of saw that here, that it was going up by 100 each time. This one's staying fixed. But just to kind of complete the sequence here, the change in total cost from adding production here, we've got 100, 100, 100, 100, and 100. All right. So does that mean that our marginal cost is a flat line? No. Good. Why? It's divided by the quantity. And that's the point I was trying to drive home here, is that even though my costs are changing what we'd say linearly by the same amount each time, as I add workers or more variable costs, that's not the case on a per hamburger basis. So marginal cost is the change in total cost divided by the change in quantity. Our final column. And what is the marginal cost associated with production at 100 hamburgers? 1. Each hamburger is running $1. So cost changed by 100 divided by the change in quantity. I added 100 hamburgers. It's $1. The next one is a little different though. So my marginal cost, the change in total cost is 100, but what is my change in quantity? 120, which is our marginal product column, which we derived, right? So 120, giving us a drop in cost to 84 cents.
So you always round up at constant.
Yeah, to 2 is fine, yep. Again, as we ramp up production and I add a third worker, I absorb $100 worth of cost, but I add a different amount of product. 100 again, we're back up to $1. The next level of production, we start to see what kick in. What law is kicking in? The law of diminishing marginal product. Now look at this column. The law of diminishing marginal product says as we produce more and more, as we add more and more of a variable resource like labor to at least one fixed resource like the grill, then the amount of additional product from each additional unit of the variable resource starts to eventually fall. When that happens, we start to see another important law jump out at us called the law of increasing cost. The law of increasing cost. Those two laws are related to each other. Because of the law of diminishing marginal product, my cost of each additional hamburger starts to go up. Not because burger's more expensive, not because hamburger buns went up. It's because of the law of diminishing marginal product. All right, we will pick it up there on Friday.